Thanks, Blair, and for those who know me, I apologize for wearing a tie this morning. I've got a long series of events today, and one of them requires it, so bear with me. It's both an honor and indeed a great pleasure to welcome all of you to Carleton University, to the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and to the Institute of African Studies for this one-day conference being held to mark the 20th anniversary of the end of Apartheid in South Africa. And I must say it was amazing to walk into this room and see it full at 8:30 on a Friday morning. So congratulations to you all for getting out so early. Despite the enormous geographic distance which separates Canada and South Africa, the relationship between the two countries is actually quite a long one, and a surprisingly long one. I know I was surprised, and I think it would be true to say that few Canadians actually know that the first ever overseas mission of Canadian troops anywhere occurred in South Africa in the South African War of 1899 to 1902. And we sent some 7,000 soldiers to South Africa in that conflict. Of 267 did not make it back. They were casualties of the war. And of course, that set the stage for Canadian involvement in the next major war fought by Great Britain a decade later, and we're celebrating the centenary of that war this year, or marking the centenary. I don't know if anyone is actually celebrating it. Now, to the best of my knowledge, that was the first and last time the Canadian forces were deployed in South Africa, although if I'm wrong in that, someone will correct me, I'm sure. Subsequent struggles have been waged not on the battlefield, but rather in the realm of international politics, in the arena of international politics. And I'm thinking of a number of moments, beginning perhaps with John Diefenbaker's efforts in 1961 to try to oust South Africa from the Commonwealth by championing a Commonwealth Prime Minister's declaration of support for racial equality, something which the white supremacist government in Victoria, of course, could not accept. And this particular Canadian has always found it somewhat ironic that it was another Conservative Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, who expanded that campaign a couple of decades later to the United Nations, and who forcibly broke ranks on this issue with his British and American counterparts, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, which is not something that many might have predicted, and certainly I would not have predicted. And his efforts have, of course, been documented in a well-known book by our very own Linda Freeman, our Carleton colleague, entitled The Ambiguous Champion, Canada and South Africa in the Trudeau and Mulroney Years. And those efforts did bear fruit in the first of a number of visits to Canada by Nelson Mandela, only a few months after his release from prison in 1990. And that leads us closer to home, I think, to the tumultuous events which took place on our own university campus in the mid-1980s, with the formation of the Carleton Anti-Apartheid Action Group, the CAAAG, and its determined efforts, first to persuade the Carleton Student Association not to sell South African or South African-related products, including Rothman cigarettes and so on, in the University Center stores, and eventually to persuade the Board of Governors of this university to adopt a policy of divestment, possibly the only time in its history that our board has taken a political stance. Really a remarkable achievement for that group of faculty and students. And it's a tribute, I think, to the power of students and faculty when they set their minds to do something. It's something we may need to remember in the years ahead. Anyway, interest in Africa has always been very strong on this campus. And a few years ago, this took a more formal direction with the creation of our Institute of African Studies, the organizers of today's event. And that came about really as the result of the dedication and commitment of a group of faculty members that span the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences and the Faculty of Public Affairs, and I'll single out in particular the director of the Institute, Blair Rutherford, for thanks there. Some of you may not know that the Institute of African Studies also sponsors a Carleton credit course taught in Africa rather than here in Ottawa each year, usually in the month of May. And in recent years, our faculty and students have gone to Burkina Faso, to Ghana, to Rwanda last year. But the very first of these courses was taught by Suzanne Clausen in history. I think it was in 2011, if I have the years correct. Yeah. So, like most histories, those of Canada and of Carleton University are checkered. There is some good, and there is some bad. And I'm sure that's also true of South Africa over the last 2 decades. But I think it's only good today that we pause to consider the last 20 years and really the extraordinary political transformation which has taken place in South Africa, something that 30 years ago no one really would have predicted. So my personal thanks to the organizers of today's event for their efforts. My thanks to the speakers that we will hear today for their participation. My thanks to you, the audience, for your attendance early on this Friday morning, and I wish you all a very stimulating conference. Thanks.
Many thanks, John. I'll just add a few words. Let me start with vital information for those of you who may need access to wireless. We found a guest pass information. So you hit the wireless network called CU-Internet. The username is wireless guest, one word, all small letters. And then the password is capital C, capital U for Carleton University, dot password, all the small letters. So now we can start the conference. Let me first by giving a big warm thanks to the speakers, some of whom traveled a great distance to come here. I'm excited to listen to your perspectives and your information. I know we're going to learn a lot and we're going to stimulate lots of discussion. I also want to echo John in thanking the audience, especially on a Friday morning. It's a great number of you turned out, which is a testament to the interest in South Africa, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. I also want to give my sincere thanks to John Osborne and the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences for providing substantial funding to help put on this conference. I also want to thank the Department of History. I'm looking for my colleague Dominique Marshall, who's here somewhere. There she is, who also got not only did she get the information about the free passwords, but she also helped to provide finance for this conference. And then I want to thank Bonnie Bates, who's in the front row here, who helped arrange the travel for the speakers and did lots of the legwork for this conference. I also want to thank Will Tate, who did a great job in chauffeuring a number of our speakers to and fro over the last day and today, as well as helping to organize a number of volunteers. I want to thank the volunteers. Melissa Armstrong, Christine Chisholm, Candide Nyondo, Tiffany Liu, Katie North, and then later Jody York, all of whom helped to make sure this runs as smoothly as possible. I want to thank MJ and Octopus Books. You'll see there's a collection of books, including the book which was launched here in Ottawa last night by John Saul. So we'll have some breaks, so please feel free to browse, and he has a connection for your credit card, so feel free to help out. And especially I want to thank my colleagues, Linda Freeman, who you'll be hearing in a few minutes, Suzanne Clausen, and Toby Morrison. Linda, as you probably know, is a colleague in the Department of Political Science. Suzanne's a colleague in the Department of History. Both of whom were cross-appointed to the Institute of African Studies. We have almost 50 professors from all the faculties at universities here who are cross-appointed to Carleton, as well as our one full-time professor, Nduka Otiono, who's also with us. Toby has been a contract teacher with us for the last couple of years. He's finishing up his PhD at Queen's. I know Mark will be talking to him about that. His supervisor in a few minutes. But Toby, Suzanne, and Linda, they're the people who helped put this together. And they're, initially we were going to try to put this together in the spring to kind of be at the same time as a number of other 20-year anniversaries, but we wanted things to ripen a bit, so we waited till the fall to put it all together. As you know, there's a lot of work putting conferences together, and unfortunately, if you haven't heard, our keynote speaker had to pull out at the last minute. Irvin Jim, who's the Secretary General of NUMSA, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. As those of you who are continuing to watch South Africa or continually involved in South Africa probably know, NUMSA has been not only the largest trade union in South Africa, but it's been leading a struggle over the number of years to push for a more critical stance of trade unions towards the ANC government, which has meant it's clashed with a lot of its colleagues within COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions. And last week, the leaders, at least a faction of COSATU, threatened to kick out NUMSA. And today, there's an emergency Central Executive Committee meeting at COSATU where they're going to try to make a decision on whether NUMSA is going to be kicked out or not. And needless to say, Irvin Jim had to be there to put forth the case of why that shouldn't happen. So we potentially will be reading the news later today what's happened there. I started with my thanks instead of ending with my thanks to give not only a sincere gesture of appreciation to everyone who's speaking and who are participating and helped to organize this, but also to indicate in a very, very small way the collaboration and solidarity necessary to bring things together. Of course, there's tensions and minor disputes and conflicts, but it's important to work together with the end point, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a great conference. Needless to say, in a much grander scale, facing a deadly opposition, the struggle against apartheid, which took many decades, is indicative of the solidarity work. Which led to the freedom in South Africa, the end of the apartheid era. Needless to say, it was led by South Africans within South Africa and outside South Africa. And needless to say, there's also conflicts amongst those who are waging that struggle, not only due to the apartheid state fomenting dissent and using the power of the state to try to crush it, but also differences within those waging the struggle. As John very nicely put it, there is definitely a core of support and interest throughout Canada. Not only at Carleton University through the anti-apartheid struggle, which Linda could talk about, she was part of it, she was here in the 1980s, but of course within the government and within the wider civil society movement, the struggle for the liberation of Southern Africa, which John Saul, who's with us, was a key person in that struggle, as well as a number of other people here. Also, of course, in Africa, you talk to Nigerians, Tanzanians, Zambians, Zimbabweans. Everyone, sees South Africa as kind of part of them. At least, particularly those of an old generation, kind of my age and maybe a bit older, because they invested a lot. Of course, sometimes that support could have been self-interested and might not always, been as altruistic as one would have liked. But they nonetheless invested a lot of time, energy, commitment, resources into the apartheid struggle, anti-apartheid struggle into South Africa. So today we're going to join the reflections on what has happened since the past 20 years, since the ANC government took power. What changes, if any, has happened in society, the economy, the politics? What changes has happened with South Africa and the region in Southern Africa? I know we have an excellent list of speakers here. I also know all of you have lots of insight and experience and knowledge which you're going to share in the discussion. So I'm looking forward to this with great anticipation.